Hello, ladies and gentlemen of YouTube, and welcome to another episode of Fanalysis, Star Wars. I'm Rutty4, this is Evan Nova95.
Hello.
This is Jen Sarai1.
Good evening, YouTube.
And this is Grey Yoda91.
Hey guys.
Why don't you set up what we're doing today, Matt?
Okay, so today we're covering part 2 of Star Wars Labyrinth of Evil by James Luceno, which is sort of book 1 of like the Dark Lord trilogy. And last time we did chapters 1 through 18. This episode we're doing chapters 19 through 38. Brief summary of them is just that the Anakin and Obi-Wan are trying to follow up on the lead, following sort of like the trail of breadcrumbs that would lead them to sort of the history of the Mechno chair and who it was created for. And meanwhile, Yoda and Mace are back on Coruscant, kind of following up on these leads and tracking Sidious basically to his doorstep, while also playing politics with the Chancellor. That's more or less a summation of this middle portion of the book. So let's kick off with Chapter 19.
Okay, so Chapter 19, leading us in with the space battle above Bail-the-Rhone. Anakin and Obi-Wan fighting in the starfighter cockpits, as they often do. I really enjoyed this one for its dynamism. Like the description of the space battle was particularly engaging for me. And seeing Anakin in his element is always entertaining, because this is kind of the one moment where he always shines outside of all the Jedi-dom.
I
had a lot of elements similar. Oh, sorry.
Well,
go ahead,
I like to follow up Callan's little note about starfighter combat being the area where Anakin shines the most, because when I was reading it, I was noticing almost a subtle foreshadowing of the karmic payback that becoming Darth Vader was. Here, Anakin states that his favorite place to be was wedded to a starfighter and prepared to show an enemy a thing or two about space combat, which basically says that his favorite place to be is inside a flying weapon here to kill things. Which
ironic.
Which is essentially what he was as Darth Vader. He was a walking kill bot here to murder the enemies of the Empire.
That pretty much covers it. But in terms of presentation, it is just, I wouldn't say it's like an average space battle, but it's like it has a lot of the same beats as, like, say, the Revenge of the Sith's novelization's portrayal of the Battle of Coruscant, or even the New Hope novelization's portrayal of the Death Star battle. But it is still very engaging and really exciting. Honestly, actually, my favorite part of this little segment is actually Grievous's observations at on the deck of his ship.
I agree with that. I was going to say, like, those are the sort of the moments where I think he shines more as an author, Luceno. I don't think he's all that. I don't think he's all that original. What he's really good at doing is sort of kind of cutting into like the heart of the characters and explaining like their sort of point of views and thought processes more so than he is at coming up with an entirely original scenario. You know, he sort of gives us the same old beats, but he does it in entertaining ways because he fleshes out the characters so well.
Yeah, it really shows kind of lenses of the characters, attaching them to every kind of scene that's happening. I really enjoy that. Going along with that, we get the question Obi-Wan asks in his head of can Anakin die? You know, the idea of fatalism and how is the prophecy kind of keeping him alive, and is he at risk, or do they have to protect him? Is that part of their duty? Interesting little analysis there.
You can really play around with that and come to a lot of really interesting conclusions. I mean, who knows what. It's always a huge what if. What if Anakin did die during the Clone Wars? How would that affect the galaxy? Obviously, it would in very big ways. So it's interesting that they really get into the heart of that. Though that they're not actually saying, like, trying to state in the book, though, that Anakin's like immortal, because he's clearly not. But it is just an interesting thing to talk about.
The funny thing is, me and my friend Kevin had a discussion about how Anakin's place within the Force and fate and destiny has so much to do with his capabilities, because this is a guy who's basically gone through his entire life having never once received a warning from the Force that told him, don't do this, back off, danger, Will Robinson, danger. Instead, what he was always receiving was essentially the shatter point of the situation, the exact knowledge of how to get through this situation no matter what. And he spent his entire life coasting on this. And then we finally come to the Mustafar duel. We finally come to that moment where he's standing on that little cargo carrier. Obi-Wan's on the shore telling him to back off. Anakin's getting the warning from the Force for the first time, back off, don't do it. And what does he do? He fucking does it.
He does it, and he immediately regrets it.
Yes.
Well, you can only take the Death Star trench run approach so many times before you crash, and he's kind of the epitome of that mindset.
Yeah.
It's very true. Yeah, it's one of those. I enjoy these moments because these kind of establish when he hasn't crashed yet. You know, this is him shining before the fall. It's always enjoyable for that reason.
Even Grievous is able to. Well, even Grievous is able to recognize that despite never actually meeting Anakin, he's able to tell that the pilot is Anakin just by how ridiculously reckless he is. So that says a lot to Grievous's capabilities, and really the rest of the chapter is him just clearing his losses at Belderone and making his escape by essentially blowing away a large, thousands of people.
He basically opens fire on the ship lanes of evacuees trying to get away from Belderone, and basically kills thousands, if not millions, of civilians to get the Republic forces to basically just flip out. And it's discussed later in the book that this is essentially Grievous's whole approach. He's all about using terror tactics to subvert his opponents by just doing something so horrible that the people who see it just go, ugh.
Yeah, which leads us nicely into chapter 20, because that's basically what this single-page chapter is all about. It's Yoda's musings on Dooku, having trained him in those ways, in the ways to kind of counter the Jedi.
Trained well by Dooku, General Grievous was. Entrapped, they strike at the weakest. Force us, they do, to choose between saving lives and continuing the fight. So, and the other thing about the Battle of Belderone that really comes to my mind is how the Jedi, by obtaining the Mechno chair, obtained intelligence on Grievous's actions, and they actually had a fairly reliable means of eavesdropping on their intelligence. But it goes back to one of the riddles on Kashyyyk on the Rakatan machine in Knights of the Old Republic, where you're asked if you receive intelligence about a major attack coming, and you have the choice between acting on the intelligence now, preventing that attack, or not doing anything, concealing the fact you have this intelligence so you can have an advantage later, even if it means allowing a whole bunch of civilians to die. And it occurs to me that what happened right here just illustrates the difference between the Jedi and the Sith, because Revan, as a Sith, would have allowed the civilians to die to conceal his access to this intelligence so he could exploit it fully later, whereas the Jedi are like, no, we have to save civilians, and they gave away what happened. And this kind of leads into Grievous being aware that, oh shit, the jig is up, so he goes to pay Viceroy Gunray a visit. Which
leads us nicely into Gunray's little interrogation via Grievous.
Can I just say that this chapter has one of like the funniest lines in the book? There's a scene where Grievous is like banging on his door trying to get in, and Gunray and Hako are both freaking out, and Hako starts to run away, and Gunray's like, "What are you doing? If you run away, he'll make us seem guilty." And then he responds with, "We are guilty," and then keeps running. I don't know why, but I just love that.
He doesn't know that.
It is a funny scene, but yeah, I mean, it's actually interesting how Lucino writes Gunray is sort of different from how most people do, because in this and in the Plagueis one, he sort of portrays somebody who's actually got a bit of a backbone. The fact that he actually tries to, bluff his way out of this, like to Grievous's face, by accusing him of incompetence, because he does. He sticks to his guns, and he doesn't know that, which is not really like what I think of as being in Newt Gunray's character, except when Lucino's writing him. But he somehow makes it work.
Yeah, you kind of buy it from him, the way he presents it. But he's not even just challenging Grievous, on his theory. He's literally insulting him, saying, "You're an abomination. You're brain dead. What are you talking about?" It's he's got some balls on him in this chapter.
Yeah, definitely.
It takes a lot of like gumption to try to convince somebody that they're crazy. You didn't send the transmission. Like, what are you talking about? You know what I mean? I mean, that's a hard sell. That's a hard sell.
And the thing is that it actually goes back to something interesting that was mentioned in the Darth Plagueis novel, which was Plagueis asked Palpatine on his appraisal of Newt Gunray, like as interacting with him directly in the Senate halls as politicians. And he talked about one of the things about him is that he seemed oddly immune to intimidation.
Right, and that's exactly what I'm saying. No other author writes him that way. Period. Yeah.
But the funny thing is that it seems like it actually kind of makes sense in the context of what we see with the character, in that He's a guy who is immune to intimidation from sources that he understands. If a politician walks up to him and threatens him, he'll just be like, oh, you want to do that? Well, I'll do something that's 10 times worse. I'm rich, motherfucker. But then when he's faced by the threat of the Sith and later on the mortal threat of Grievous, well, even Grievous, he tries to pull that same fronting.
Yeah, which I find surprising. I do, yeah.
Yeah. I think it's because the threat of the Sith he doesn't understand, because as Sith Lords, they're basically space wizards. Grievous is a droid. He's a robot. He's a physical being that Gunray can reach out and touch and has a decent understanding of, even if he doesn't have any sort of control over him whatsoever.
Mm. And we get them asking about the Meccano chair, chasing up on that lead, and that realizing, or rather confirming their theory that was the reason they had been discovered at Belderone ahead of time. But that leads us into chapter 22. Yeah, with Dooku's musings on both of the characters. Because it's interesting how he sees them both as pitiful creatures. It's like, poor Grievous, poor Gunray, pitiful creature, and it kind of directly parallels that. I enjoyed that.
Yeah, and this kind of connects to something I was mentioning in our previous video about this, and how one of the book's strengths is really playing with perspective. And while Dooku's musing about Grievous, there are 2 points that I think it brings up that really are really interesting. One is that he cements Grievous actually being a credible threat by noting that he rarely loses a battle. Where the hell did you drop that ball, TCW? And B, he also confirms that Grievous's accident was not an accident in the slightest, which is something I mentioned in the previous one, because Grievous still thinks it was. And of course, Dooku knows otherwise. So it's interesting how they're tackling that same topic, but differently.
As well as that, we also get confirmation that his mind was altered, unbeknownst to him.
Yes, exactly.
He wasn't always this raging lunatic of a war machine.
I think you kind of get that a bit in the chapter that deals directly with his backstory. Like, he doesn't seem like an overt villain, like a warlord, yeah, but not. He seems like the product of the world he came from more than anything else. It isn't necessarily even a bad person at the start,
No. Circumstance.
Yeah. Circumstance and the Sith. Not something you want working
Who'd have thought you could actually sympathize with Grievous? Who would have guessed?
And the other thing I liked about this...
Oh, sorry. I just wanted to say real quick. That's actually what makes me sad about the way the character's gone on to be portrayed, is because I felt for him. Like, this is not a new book. This is not a new book. I mean, like, this has been my version of the character for many years now, and it's been sort of dragged through the mud for years since then. So that's why it's so hard to swallow, because you like the character,
Yeah. One of the other things I like about this chapter is Dooku himself basically just viewing all of his minions as expendable assets that he plans on disposing of eventually anyway, which is actually one of the creepy things about being Darth Sidious's apprentice. You are encouraged to share his view of other people, viewing other people as disposable assets, but he always tricks you into thinking that you're his one confidant, you're the one guy he values, you're the one guy that he's not going to dump eventually. But, in actuality, Sidious will dump everyone eventually. No matter who you are, you get screwed eventually.
Yeah, Dooku's not stupid. He's questioning. He's like, "Is this my time? How am I still irreplaceable?" He's always questioning that, keeping that down.
Well, he's not stupid, but he's delusional and sort of wishful thinking here. Like, he wants to believe he's more important to his master than he really is.
And
he's shocked right up until the moment, like when he's betrayed.
Right.
And the hilarious thing is that after rereading Yoda Dark Rendezvous, is that Asajj Ventress had a better handle on the situation than Dooku himself did. She told him straight to his face, Sidious is going to use you up and cast you aside, and that's exactly what he did. And, the hilarity that Asajj fucking Ventress had more insight and understanding of these sorts of issues than Dooku did, which is ultimately kind of a perfect demonstration of the fact that at the end of the day, Dooku is still a Jedi. He's a fucked up, twisted, fallen Jedi, but he's still a Jedi. He invests too much trust into his superiors.
Yeah, the nature of Ventress's ego compared to Dooku is what gives her that advantage. Dooku's ego is what gets in his way, because he's perfectly rationally aware of the problem. He's kind of personally designed not to accept it, because that would mean invoking the idea of weakness and fear, which he doesn't want to. But yeah, we get some musings by him on the Sith and the Senate as a whole, as well as Cypher Dyas, because he's lamenting past deeds and how he kind of cemented his ascension to the Sith Order.
He also kind of talks about how Cypher Dyas was kind of almost his like confidant during his troubled times, the only one who could, he could go to and actually possibly understand. A nice little insight into their relationship.
Indeed, yeah.
What was the
really is a shame we never got a super detailed story revolving around their time together.
It would definitely come up in a Dooku book if ever it happened. It would be like a chapter to do it.
Still waiting on that.
Yeah, we'll keep waiting. But I mean, at this point, they're not focusing on anything nice, are they? But I mean, what was the reason he gave for like what was wrong with Yoda? Like it was because he was too old and conservative or something. What did he say?
Yeah, it was something.
That comes up in a later.
No. Well, but he mentioned that was the reason why he chose Cypher Dyas directly. So I'm just saying.
Right.
I mean, you brought it up. So
he was an old one. But yeah,
he was just citing his age.
I'm pretty sure. Yeah. Age and experience having kind of made him stayed in his ways, which Cypher Dyas wasn't. He was more aware of
it. Just seems sort of ironic because like he's basically accusing Yoda and the Jedi of being sort of too rigid or stubborn to do like things a new way, but like Dooku's very stubborn. It's like he can point the finger at everyone but himself,
Again, it's that problem of
dish it out, but he can't take it.
Yeah. But yeah, then we get chapter 23 with Yoda and Palpatine.
Also, I think we should also talk about how Dooku actually hesitates in warning Sidious.
Yes, I meant to mention that. Thank you. It's actually on the notes. Yes, you're right. He doesn't immediately go through with it. He thinks it takes a moment to share in that visual of the power, like
is
the
that
power I could wield.
Am I making this up, or did he do something similar in Dark Rendezvous?
I think he did.
Did he consider holding back a truth or something at one? Like, it's been a while since I read that book, but I feel like he displays like this pattern, which is sort of like it's like a day in the life.
Stop and give serious consideration to the idea of going through with some plan to kill Palpatine, but always stopping at the last second and just doing the dutiful apprentice thing, which
look where that got him.
It's interesting to think of what Dooku could have become as a Sith Lord had he been allowed to actually grow instead of just being constantly jerked around on a chain by Palpatine. But and
it's also nice having that sort of through line of like that sort of the question of like how they exercise their loyalty, like sort of differentiating Sidious's various minions. Like Maul, the classical representation anyway, was like just instant obedience. Didn't even think about betraying his master. Basically like a whipped dog, And there's Dooku, much more complex. And then there's Grievous, who, he calls him like a pitiful creature or whatever. Like he's sort of, he wouldn't continue to serve in the capacity that he does if he knew he'd been fucked so badly. So it's like he's somebody like Dooku has to believe that he's important to this effort on some level. So they all have that different psychology. I like that. They're distinct characters at this point in the publishing history,
Absolutely, yeah.
And it's also a perfect example of just how savvy Palpatine is at dealing with other people, that he's able to keep a leash on such radically different individuals. He's not like Darth Vader, who can only push people to act through fear. That's all he can do. He can only intimidate. He can't manipulate. Palpatine, it's like, oh, I understand what makes you tick.
Yeah. I agree with that, and I don't like to give Palpatine
savvy politicians.
Yeah, I don't like to give Palpatine compliments because he's such a despicable person. But credit where credit's due, he is very good. That's basically the thing he's best at. At the end of the day.
A particular example in this book is when he talks to Dooku, or we get musing from Dooku about the past and how he once mentioned that he laments his treatment of Maul and how how he shaped him and let him kind of swallow too much anger and drive and passion, and he should have made him more of a emotionless void. So even in his admission of failure, he's kind of bringing Dooku in as that faux confidant, and even acknowledging a failure, he's still tying that to manipulation of people. It's very challenging, very impressive. But yeah, that leads us into chapter 23 with him and Mace and Yoda.
And this chapter opens with. And this chapter opens with Mace Windu looking at a statue of some deity called like Wapoe, which apparently is the demigod of disguise.
Yeah.
Subtle foreshadowing, people. I wonder what that could possibly lead to.
Yeah, this is the thing about like Lucino. Like he just always has to be adding like all this overt shit in there. Like it's like it's almost like, why is the character even wondering about this and not acting on it? It's like, we're looking for a secret Sith Lord. It couldn't be in this office where there's somebody is worshiping the god of disguise. It couldn't be him. I mean, that's a little ridiculous.
When you think about it, it's kind of dumb.
It would be best. It would be best if that was just prose in the text without Mace taking notice of it, because it's literally like Mace going, there's nothing suspicious about this. Like, I mean, what?
But at the same
it's
time,
a little
it's pays
too
special
on the
attention
nose.
to the idea of the perception filter that the kind of dark side is drawing on. How they are shifting people's perceptions and stopping them from realizing stuff that's blatantly obvious. And we'll get a scene later on where we can acknowledge that.
The other funny thing is that because all of the statues that Palpatine has in his office are basically hooded figures, decked out to look like monks, it's like, on the one hand, it's like ancient statues dedicated to gods of disguise, subtlety, and treachery, or just straight up Sith artifacts. But the funny thing is that all of those statues look surprisingly a lot like Jedi. It's like the Jedi, not knowing that a lot of these are Sith artifacts or Sith themed, might be looking around and thinking, "Ooh, I like this guy's taste in design." And it's kind of he's even using the similarities between the Jedi and the Sith and their common emphasis on austerity to kind of get under their skin and manipulate them. It's like they're.
I agree with that. Like, it's kind of nice when that's a subtle thing, but he literally has a mural of an ancient battle between the Jedi and the Sith hanging in his office, and Mace is like, well, this is curious. Like he stares at it on occasion when he visits. It's a bit overt.
If you ask me, they should really take a closer look at that statue of Sistros. I think there might be something hidden inside that they might be concerned about. I'll just leave that. I'll just leave that as it is.
A gravimetric scanner to find it.
Yeah, let's just leave that as is.
I feel like there's probably like a story somewhere where someone goes, why is there a dildo in here? Just put it back. Just put it back. Put it back.
Oh, Jesus.
Like the cleaning, the nighttime cleaning, crew.
Oh,
what?
It's phallic enough, for sure.
Yeah.
But the scene basically amounts to Palpatine trolling the Jedi under the guise of, well, you should have told me about Builderone. I could have helped with the intel. And even when it specifically notes him swiveling the chair away to face the window at one point, and you just know he's got that shit-eating grin on him when he turns around. It's not specifically described, but it's happening.
Is this the one? This is the one where he sort of like tries to frame it like the Senate or like getting suspicious of the Jedi. Is that what he's talking about?
Yeah.
And so he wants them to give him all of the information so that he can, do his job as the head of, of the Republic and make the decisions. Which I kind of get, like what he's saying on the surface level. Even, I know he's being manipulative, but like I get his point. But then, is it this same conversation? He says that we can't appear to be in collusion. He says that.
Yes, or that might be a later one. There's so many damn.
But it's like so he wants cooperation from the Jedi, but he doesn't want to seem like he's in collusion with it. I mean, it's like and the whole thing I love about it is Mace has no patience for this because I wouldn't either.
Yeah. Yoda as
well,
like
this mixed signal.
That we must collude because if we don't, we're going to lose the war.
Yeah. You're definitely right. Yoda sees through the same bullshit. I'm not saying Mace is seeing something Yoda's not. It's just Mace's demeanor would be closer to my own. Yeah. Like Yoda's sort of playing the political game. Yeah, I wouldn't have time for it either myself.
The thing about Palpatine that makes him so difficult to argue with is that a lot of his points are very difficult to challenge because on a pure objective level, he's usually right, which is kind of what makes him so scary. He's actually got his finger on the pulse of matters.
Yeah, the biggest
only because he made it so it's impossible for him not to be, but I guess.
Yeah,
he does. It's fun watching him act here, because he has to pretend to be offended by the like when they say it was a Jedi operation. A Jedi operation. Like it said, like you're supposed to read it that way. It says like he says it slowly. It's like you can just hear the actor saying it that way. It's perfectly in character for him, and at the same time, in his mind, I don't give a shit. I mean, what I know, I control both sides of this, But he has to pretend, to be like, oh, you Jedi are taking over. It's like I have to be affronted, and really, in his head, in his heart, there's just nothing, stillness. It's like I knew this This is just what this is today. This is as on schedule as can be, you know.
Oh, and
Just when he thought it was his acting ability that would be put to the test.
Yeah, and it's like, oh, you're doing this because you want to track Sidious down. Oh, well, in that case, do accept my full apologies, please.
Yeah.
Do everything you can to bring in Darth Sidious. And inside, he's just like, more.
You know, I gotta wonder how often Palpatine is literally just flipping the Jedi off under the table just because he can.
He's got that perception filter, hasn't he?
Just the fact that he has a goddamn cloak in his desk is ridiculous. I mean, like at all times.
No. It wasn't in his desk. It was in a ceiling compartment above his chair.
That's even worse. That's even more.
It literally just opened up, and he opens it with telekinesis and just lowers the robe onto himself.
What if the Night Crew discovered that?
Like, that's way too grandiose. That's just that's sickeningly grandiose.
That?
I'm sorry.
That's literally how he stores his cloak.
I prefer the visual of him like propping open the ceiling tile with an umbrella and just kind of letting it fall down. It's just
because the reason you prefer that is because at that point it's a full-on robot chicken sketch.
I know.
Hey, Crayola, come over here and help me close this down.
I hadn't even thought of the Crayola scene. Anyway, that leads us into chapter 24 with the Escart mining operation infiltration. With
I actually pronounced it as Escarte. I've said Escarte. I know there's no apostrophe in there. I just think it sounds cooler.
Fair enough.
I'm gonna say do it however you want, but the audiobook it's Escart. I just thought I would throw that in there. Not that that's final proof, because in the Darth Bane trilogy, and not to get tangential, but in the Darth Bane, this has always bothered me. In the Darth Bane audiobooks, they pronounce the name Caleb as Khalib. Please, I don't have time for that. Anyway, just wanted to say that real quick. Back on topic.
Yeah, we get a little kind of breakout scene of them kind of going on to a scout operation and trying to find, what was his name? Kassar.
Yeah, I forgot his first name. It started with a T, I think.
Was it Thal Kassar?
Thal Kassar.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. He's a Bith.
Thal.
Lucina likes Bith, I guess. Huh?
He likes Bith, yeah.
Yeah,
he likes Bith. I wonder why.
And he likes them to be sort of morally ambiguous and shady, it seems.
Yes, yeah.
I think he really likes Bith are renowned for A, mathematical intelligence, B, species-wide moral compass. James Lucino seems the sort of person who always asks the what if. What if a race's positive traits were turned to shadier practices? So, okay, a Bith who's still a super genius, but instead of being moral, he's a criminal.
That was interesting. That's an interesting thing because, I mean, if this was like common knowledge, I think I spaced it or just didn't know about it to begin with. Like this book established the Bith population, like or species, as being allied with the Separatists outright. I've never taken notice of that. I mean, that's what was said in the conversation between him and Anakin at one point, I believe.
Yeah, that's in the next chapter, I believe, in the interrogation. But it's these two kind of blend together as a scene, or multiple scenes, I guess, a little sequence. It's something I hadn't noticed either that they had a full on species.
So it's not just me then. Good.
Yeah, we've obviously both read it before, and both seen this before. Yeah. Just I'd never really computed it. Yeah, no, I like the sequence. It's a little kind of a mini kind of playback of the Death Star in many ways, and like a lot of the visuals, a lot of the iconic moments. You know, again, next chapter, but again, these two blend together, so we'll do them all as one. Tractor beam with Obi-Wan. You know, I'm sure I'll never have to draw on this skill again. And he's doing the exact same thing he does for
again, subtle.
Yeah.
I just wrote this with the script in hand. Don't mind me. You know, that's Lucino. Script in hand.
And
it's one of those things you either like or you don't.
Yeah, and the cell.
I think he's like Dobby the house elf, and that he punishes himself if he goes more than 2 pages without making a reference to something. Like bad Lucino. Like there was no reference for 2 pages. You know?
Just sticky notes everywhere.
Sticky notes everywhere. Yeah, absolutely.
I'm strongly of the opinion that the mantle of responsibility, to draw on a Halo reference for a moment, solely lies on Lucino when it comes to the expanded universe of Star Wars, because no one knows it like he does, or at least no one seems to present it as such. The amount of vague references he draws on, I'm like, wow, I'm not the only one who knows this exists.
No, he definitely. I used to think that he prided prided himself on doing that, but I think he just really enjoys it, like to the point that he every now and then he does it to the point of, okay, would the character really know that this happened? This obscure trivia? I think not, but whatever. I mean, he does it because he likes to do it, and I applaud him for that.
Yeah, likewise.
At the end of the day,
most of the time it's subtle, but yeah, you're right. Every now and then again, one does come out a bit out of left field, and like, okay, odd. But yeah, they get Kassar out, and Anakin goes a little bit sinister on him again as he interrogates. They find out that they need to head to they find out the name of the pilot of the ship that they're trying to track, because they're basically following at this point the second transponder that Sidious had on Maul's ship and how it was designed.
The person who delivered it.
Yeah, this is sort of like following like the trail of breadcrumbs, you know. It's just trying to I would say it's a paper trail, but it's not. It's more like a people trail, I guess, because they're chasing down the various personnel that were involved in all these shady goings on over the years.
Yep. So they get the name and they escape, and that leads us back to Coruscant.
Yes, chapter 26. We get Dooku returning to the works to meet Sidious, which is an important scene because this happening comes up later. Lots goes on. Yeah.
We learn about the history of the works.
Yes, history of the works.
Quite an interesting place.
Yeah, it's one of those places in Coruscant you can see dripping off the pages every description. You can imagine these great big blocks of just criminal hell and underworld that have just been left to rot in typical bureaucratic maneuverings. I said an interesting scenario or setting rather.
Yeah, there's some chilling about that. The idea that there's lots of bodies hidden there. Like the way that in the real world you would find them in the desert.
Yeah, sinister, and the fact that no one can do anything about it as well because it's so monolithic. No one knows what owns.
No one knows who owns what.
Right. Yeah. Which is sort of like just a crazy idea that these buildings can be so ancient, that nobody, like, we literally don't know who owns this.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy.
And it's like, this is the place the Sith choose to live in. It's like their lair is basically an old administration tower for one of the factories right in the middle of this decaying industrial landscape. It's like, this is their Dark Tower of Barad-dûr, and this is their Mordor.
Dooku even notes that Sidious's presence there for so long has made the building strong on the dark side.
And if it's that idea that the whether true or not, that the Sith use darkness that has always been there, like it's like a hermit crab or whatever. We'll use this. I mean, no one wants to be here. It's inconvenient. It's creepy as all hell, and nobody wants to get tied up in the red tape, even if they had to come here to figure out who owns what.
Check.
Yeah. It's like it all just.
Yeah. And the thing is that it's still a place that provides lots of resources because you got access to the criminal underworld for Sithly things, and you got access to all of the decaying factories for any mechanical components you might need. Like, this is a place where you could basically set up a terrifying laboratory and no one would know because every single thing that's being used in this lab is just being scavenged from the surrounding industrial wasteland that no one's actually keeping an eye on.
I know this is unrelated, but doesn't the Plagueis novel note that the works is one of the few places that Maul can actually kind of roam around without causing a panic?
Exactly, because he fits right in.
Yeah.
A black cloak with scary tattoos.
I was gonna say that, like the lab you're describing, it would fit in with everything else around there. And it's noteworthy that in other books, like Darth Maul Shadowhunter, it's noted that his appearance is capable of turning heads even on Coruscant, because he stands out that much. So yeah.
Look at him.
Yeah, but it says something about that sector that he doesn't stand out there.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So right before, Dooku goes to the building, and right before he actually meets with Sidious, we actually get what is possibly the most detailed description of his training under Sidious that we've pretty much ever gotten, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, and he's reveling in it as well. He takes extreme amount of enjoyment and pride in memories of being under a real mentor. Finally, he fell for the dark side like that. He thought, oh, we can use this and we can draw on it, and immediately was infatuated with it.
I'm just imagining Dooku standing in that hangar with his arms spread, eyes closed, just
reveling
in his rage.
Yeah, he makes a lot of interesting like notes. Like he actually, first of all, he notes that Sidious and him never really sparred physically. Interesting.
Yeah. Which is
No
actually
need to.
one of the things. Which is
No
one of
need,
the things
yeah.
I do find so interesting about Maul. Just going back to Maul for a second, Maul is the only apprentice that Palpatine trained top to bottom by himself. The other two came ready-made.
Mhm.
And it specifically notes that Dooku didn't need to have the kind of the Jedi training
Traditional
drills out of
training.
him, or the lightsaber time wasted on lightsaber dueling. It was all okay. It was basically, it describes it literally as a crash course in the dark side.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but he didn't. Yeah, he didn't need the lightsaber training beaten into him, and he didn't need the Jedi ways beaten out of him. He was already working his way down that path for a long time, for decades at that point. It sort of reminds me of that quote from Kreia about like how it's such a quiet thing to fall. Like Dooku, he doesn't view it that way. He doesn't view it as a descent, so he doesn't acknowledge it as such. But he's been doing just that for years at that point.
Yeah, and he goes.
Sidious just
Yoda
gave
would
him the
call it-
tools to dig that hole deeper.
Yeah, and Yoda would call it, mastering evil, and he does it in a snide, like, ugh, you don't understand, Yoda. And in reality, he's the one who just doesn't understand. He cannot comprehend his own failure, and it's so interesting to see him kind of revel in that.
We also get reference to the fact that over the course of his training, Sidious didn't really talk much about his own personal youth or his master Darth Plagueis very much. Interesting little thing, which is ironic considering how interested Plagueis himself was in Dooku when you think about it. It almost makes me wonder if like he refused to talk about Plagueis just as like a way of like sniting his master even more.
I think
Wouldn't put it past him.
the other reason why I think he didn't tell him anything about Plagueis is that Dooku probably would have realized that he had been manipulated for quite some time. If he was told, "Oh, Darth Plagueis was Hugo Damask," and Dooku's like, "What? I knew Hugo Damask. I spoke with him many times." Wait.
I was just gonna say, it's also like, sort of a subtle way of hinting at a mystery that isn't written yet. Because like in terms of publishing history, this book is only about as old as like Revenge of the Sith. It was published the same year, so that story didn't exist yet. But you still acknowledge the presence of that character, because a character like that would have been a force, and we find out that he is in his own novel later on. So you do want to acknowledge it. You don't want to ignore it completely, but how do you broach the subject when there is no subject really to dive into? So he's really good at doing that kind of stuff. Hinting at it in an artful way. Yeah.
It'd be interesting to see or to know how much he had in his head already at this point. For ideas that he could potentially get to work with.
I would guess rather little, to be honest. I mean, this is like hot on the heels of the Revenge of the Sith, the movie. It's like I doubt he had all of that mapped out at all.
I mean, Plagueis wasn't even referenced as even being a Bith until I think the Jedi vs. Sith Essential Guide, and that came out years after the movie.
He just misspoke.
That's what I said.
Yeah. No,
You
sorry.
said
What did I say?
He said Bith.
You said Beth.
It's cool. We knew what you meant.
Oh,
we knew what you meant.
Whoops. Sorry.
Wouldn't that be a sight though?
Derp.
But yeah, no. So that the scene eventually leads to them talking about the Meccano chair, and Dooku kind of like awkwardly going, "Oh yeah, so this happened. Please don't kill me." And he, even in this moment, he's kind of panicking, like, "Is this it? Is this my time? Is this the moment of reckoning? Am I about to be turned on?" And he's like, "No, it's fine. And
Sidious does get genuinely annoyed, which is
he does.
interesting.
Dooku had been able to count on one hand the number of times he had seen Sidious angry. Suddenly, he needed two hands.
I love that description. You got the visual of Dooku in his head going 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh crap! Nice.
I didn't think of it that way, but the idea of Christopher Lee, who's so like erudite, like being like raising it. Well, I need my fingers to count to 5. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1. What comes after 4? Like, yeah, that's ridiculous. And also the language of one of the things, the way he was greeted is interesting, because he spends that chapter, describing his Jedi and Sith training, and now I have a real master. And the way that Sidious phrases like the greeting when he's like, "Oh, welcome, Tyrannus." He's like, "Yeah, I'm here, master. I came straight from blah." He goes, "And took a great risk you did, my apprentice." Like that could be a Yoda line, like just in terms of syntax. Like it's just funny how he's like, "I've come so far, and yet, and yet
I can't escape it."
Yeah, right. It reads like a Yoda quote.
Yeah, it's brilliant. I love that kind of thing.
Another example of the Palpatine troll.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Now, another thing this sequence like talks about. I mean, I'm sure most people when they first saw the movie figured this out, but this novel does confirm that Dooku's revelation to Kenobi about Sidious controlling the Senate on Geonosis was planned.
Yes, yeah, it was actually a deliberate kind of drop. And I get this is one of those examples of where I think Lucino was trying to explain. He's like saying, okay, so this doesn't really make sense that this happened, so let's kind of give a reason for it. And the reason it gave was, that they wanted to throw the Jedi off with the truth. They wanted to confuse them. And I was like, that could really have backfired.
Real easily.
It's definitely a hand wave moment that doesn't really pay off in a holistic sense.
Look at Ron Harkim. He almost developed a midichlorian test for every single person in the Senate because of that little drop.
True.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's I only mildly disagree with that. I entirely see your point, and I'm not saying you don't have one, so don't mistake me. It's just that I think it does its job in explaining why the Jedi haven't uncovered, like the mystery, like why they haven't gotten to the bottom of this, because in part, Sidious was able to calculate well before ahead of time how they would react to various bits of information, and also just the fact that the information came from a Sith. It was sketchy information, like intel from the beginning in their eyes. Like they're in some ways, to their detriment, disinclined to accept it as truth because the Sith are masters of deception, as Yoda said at the beginning of this.
Absolutely, yeah, and that's why I do ultimately buy it as it didn't immediately ring false for me. It was a case of that was the only thing bolstering it up. Once you look at that and go, yeah, but and add that kind of thing to it, it kind of is very much it is why it stands out as being a retrospective handwave rather than the initial plan and in part of the initial plot. Not that Lucas would have had a better idea anyway, but you know what I mean.
Right.
The funny thing is that it also represents how Palpatine's emphasis on constructing win-win situations even carries over to how he deceives people. Because the thing is that if the Jedi had taken this information seriously, they would have alienated the Senate immediately by trying to openly investigate them, which would have played to his plans again, because the Jedi and the Senate are now...
Yeah. Be like, look what they're doing!
But the chapter wraps up with them discussing the irritant of Obi-Wan Kenobi and how, addendum to the plan I've just given you, kill Obi-Wan. And I don't know whether I like or dislike this, but I acknowledge the fact that Dooku doesn't have a particular problem with this. He's like, oh, is it finally time to? Is he such a threat to our plans? That's basically all the defense he gives in Obi-Wan's favor before immediately going out and organizing the plan. So the loyalty to his lineage in terms of the Jedi, legacy and the family of Qui-Gon, down to Master Padawan line thing, that's kind of gone now at this point. He is that far fallen.
To me, it's one of those things that sort of waxes and wanes depending on the day. Because in the next book, he's still having issues with that. It's like there are times where he's more resolute about it than others. Yeah.
I think the big thing is also he's kind of concluded that if Palpatine gives direct orders on the matter, okay, Kenobi has to go.
That's true.
If there's some leeway to recruit him, can we please recruit him?
That's true.
Yeah. And because Palpatine basically just gives a flat, no, we can't.
Yeah.
He's too indoctrinated. He'll never let go of the Jedi way.
Yeah. Like when we get to that point in Revenge of the Sith, it is more Dooku just floating out an idea than refuting Palpatine's order. So you're right on that one.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like the way it plays for that reason. But then we get the chapter 27 is Bail Organa visiting the temple, which I enjoy. I like the fact that we get to see him and why he's not familiar per se, but more familiar than most with the Jedi temple and Jedi ways, and why he's the first to kind of fly personally to the temple when he sees it burning in the Revenge of the Sith. I like this kind of this establishing of that, if nothing else.
I'm sorry, like I don't remember this chapter too well. I think I might.
It's very short. Not too much happens. He gets to the temple. All the Jedi are there. They watch his address. They comment on it with disdain. And really, I think the biggest thing that happens in this chapter is that they're set up for the planets we see in Revenge of the Sith, because they talk about Mygeeto, Felucia.
Oh, this is where he calls them the Triad of Evil or whatever.
Kiadi calls them the Triad of Evil.
Yeah, this is like Palpatine called them that rather. Yeah.
Sorry.
That's what I hinted at in the last. Well, not so much hinted. I just said like that. This book came under fire for obvious parallels to the Bush administration and real world politics. I mean, there's even like that. Remember that one character? What was his name? Travail. Like that helped him with the Bith. He was a member of the SBI, not FBI, the SBI.
Yeah.
just in case you guys didn't know. I mean, you're towing the edge there. Maybe a little too over. But anyway, back on topic.
Yeah, so we get the kind of establishment of that and how the war. This is kind of the Jedi acknowledging on paper, I guess, in scene, the ridiculousness of the strategy that they're currently being sent towards. The idea that they have to go to these they're bastions of the separatists, but they don't mean anything in the overall war front. They're just insignificant. They refer to it being like it's trying to seal up a pinprick when you've just been shot in the chest by a blaster bolt. There's no point. And that's what kind of leads to a few scenes later when they return to Palpatine and address the stupidity of the strategies being placed. But yeah, that's kind of sums up that chapter effectively. Moving on to chapter 28 with the introduction of one of my favourite Twi'lek characters.
Ronate.
Yeah.
At Nails 3.
No.
Well,
sorry.
before they run it. Oh gosh. Well, anyway, before they introduce her, we open with them on Nails 3, and our two favorite Jedi go bar hopping.
Yes.
This is one of those chapters that, for whatever reason, is one of the standout ones. I always remember that little portion. It's just, it's very amusing, and thinking that this is one of their last adventures together, it seems somewhat appropriate somehow.
Yeah.
They at least got to go on one last bar hop before shit hit the fan, which yeah. However, the other reason why I love this chapter is because it is further confirmation of the fact that Obi Kenobi is a violent drunk. Every single time he has a drink, someone loses a limb. Every single fucking time.
At least this time it wasn't entirely his fault, but yeah.
Yeah, more circumstance than personal, personality.
Yeah,
when
but anyway,
but
they
yeah,
go
they
through
get tipsy.
They get tipsy and they finally find the correct bar.
Yeah, and get led up to the person who's apparently waiting for them. Effectively said, "Yeah, just send my executioners up. Why not? I mean, whatever. This is someone who's given up on life." But yeah, name's Fael. Not that that's the name originally presented to her because she's under an alias to start with. But yeah, she's a lot of fun. I really enjoy this sequence because of her and the interactions with the Jedi and how she's kind of
We're literally introduced to her like on her bed, drunk with like a bunch of dirty glasses, just like, okay, so you're here to kill me?
Yeah. Do I get a last meal? I mean,
yeah.
It's like she's that far gone on the whole I'm about to die mentality.
I mean, she's not the same character as this, but she has that air of like, say, like a female Jack Sparrow or Captain Jack Sparrow.
Yeah, same sort of thing. Yeah, she's just a lot of fun. In this and the following jet ski speeder scene. Because they basically they meet her, they interrogate her with good Jedi, bad Jedi, and they get attacked by.
And Callan wasn't making a pun there.
Yeah, that's literally what they say, or she says.
Yeah,
it's like good Jedi, bad Jedi, and you can just the scene, the entire sequence, as you said, Matt, it's quite enjoyable, and I think it's because Lucino writes tipsy and drunk characters extremely well in terms of the way that they're...
with the exception of one.
With the exception of one. Yeah. I wonder which one we're talking about. But yeah, the kind of idea, the mental processing and the dialogue as a result of that, he really does capture the different kind of ways that characters tilt left or right when intoxicated. And the fact that our first introduction to this character of Fael is that just makes it all the more enjoyable. But yeah, they get attacked by the forces Dooku sent. They have an entertaining and well written sort of jet ski chase sequence.
The jet ski happens in the next chapter.
Yeah. But these are two chapters that get paired together in terms of the sequence and portrayal. But I like the description of Anakin trying to explain how it works to Obi-Wan. And he's like, "What?" And then she's going, "Go here, go that way, and we'll get to where you're talking about." And it's like, I'll just follow you. the descriptions and everything is just brilliant in these two chapters. It's probably my favourite.
Which, granted,
of the book thus far,
you'd think Kenobi would at
massive
least...
plot moments.
Yeah.
Favourite of the side adventures, I should say.
Yeah.
Well,
I mean, you would think that Obi-Wan would at least know how to turn on a snow speeder. I think that scene might have depicted him being a little too dumb, but he's drunk, so I'll give it a pass.
It describes it as a very esoteric vehicle, though. It's not a standard. It's not even a swoop. It's not a swoop. It's not a speeder. It's just this weird, very local.
It's a sled.
Yeah. It's a local vehicle. So I can buy that he's not familiar with it.
Fair enough.
Yeah. But after that, we get the return to Coruscant in Chapter 30 with Windu and T assaulting the works. It says a lot that he took for this particular mission. He thought, just a Sith Lord. I'll take T and a bunch of Padawans. Oh, and some troops. And he calls it the Dream Team as well, which is interesting.
Well, to be fair, he wasn't walking in like guns blazing for a fight. It was like a tracking team. And he expected to be denied. He expected his request to form this team to be blocked by bullshit politics. So, dream situation, more like.
And let's be honest, we've seen what happens when Mace gets his serious team going.
The passage of that not being a dream team.
I think the other thing to consider is the fact that the Jedi just don't. They're not. It seemed to me that they never really expected the Sith Lord to be any more powerful than themselves. Like, they were probably expecting him to be like Council Master level, but probably inferior to Yoda, not really understanding, no, this guy is the equal to Yoda. He is Yoda's inverse. Expect something as powerful as that. But they just don't quite seem to wrap their head around that.
It would have been interesting if Sidious had literally just been waiting for them in the works and how that would have gone down.
Hey, guys!
There'd have been a lot of dead Padawans in that scene, to say nothing of the
yeah.
But they infiltrate the...
Post in the comics, Mace, T, a bunch of Padawans, and some troops versus Sidious.
The scary thing is that they could all just come in there and Palpatine would just say, "Execute Order 66."
That's a good point.
Oh my God!
It's like It's like if you bring clone troopers to apprehend Palpatine, that's literally what he'll do. He can do that. He can just say, "Commander, what's your face?
Valiant.
Execute Order 66. Windu's right here. Gun him down."
Yeah, that would
chop.
That would have not gone well for them.
God.
But yeah, I like the actual investigation itself, because at this point we get the tracking from Dine, and the kind of the droid technicians that kind of sending in the sensors and tracking the footprints and looking for all of the physical traits.
That's sort of the thing, is like they didn't realize how close they were. That's why I don't fault him for this. It was just a track. This was all forensics. This is not my squad to challenge the Sith Lord. This is a forensic team, which makes sense to me. They were blown away by how successful they were getting. They didn't realize they were right there, like on his heels.
But at the same time,
I also really love
this bigger force. If you weren't expecting some sort of assault on the building, if it was just investigative tracking, I feel like they could have probably scaled it back a bit. But I get where you're coming from. It could be either way.
This is you nitpicking, I have to say. But anyway.
I also really love how this sequence notes how they use information gathered from Quinlan Voss as a way of pinpointing the exact location. I love that detail because it makes so much sense, because we know that Voss was actually in that building with Dooku in the Republic comics.
Yeah.
Or at least that
Jedi. Yeah, it's like Star Wars Republic striking from the shadows. I can't quote the issue number. I'm not quite that detailed. But yeah, it's like the end of the comic. It's like he literally meets Dooku in the hangar, and Dooku boards his ship and leaves while Voss is still in the building.
Yeah.
Which kind of shows how much confidence he had in this place's security measures, as well as the fact that, force-based security measures, as well as the fact that Voss himself would probably have just thought, oh, it's Dooku's own personal hidey hole. Okay, whatever. Not realizing that this is literally Palpatine's summer retreat.
Well, it's not even acknowledged as being Dooku's hidey hole, because if they thought that, they would have made stationed watch over it. But it's just kind of acknowledged as Voss thinking, oh, it's just a random place he thought I'd meet in the works. It has no significance. That's the level of again, going back to the term perception filter. That's the level of the kind of force defenses it has placed over it. And Mace's explanation in his head, the only way Voss could have missed this monolith of the dark side is because he was one with the dark himself at that point. He must have been. And because at that point he hasn't realised just how effective the shroud is on his own perception. Even acknowledges Yoda's warning of it, which I enjoyed. Yoda warns that there will be areas that are shielded, and it's like, I don't feel like I'm missing anything, but the clones are here for that anyway, so that's what we brought them for. I like the emphasis on showing how the mundane, quote unquote, methods of tracking and investigating and all that jazz are putting the best foot forward in the face of the Force in this scene, because of how it's how powerful the dark side shroud is. As much as I hate that as a factor, if it's going to be a factor, presented as such, and I enjoy that.
So they find Dooku's solar sailor, and then they discover a tunnel. Seems like an ordinary tunnel at first, but then they send in some probes and calculate, and they discover that this tunnel leads to the Senate district.
Just to say, they find the tracks of the solar sailor, right? Yeah, they just sorry, the actual impression is left in the I guess the dust of the room, effectively. But yeah, they lead to the tracking of the tunnels, and this is where, like you said, Matt, they kind of get, oh crap, we're getting close. So this is the point where they realize,
they totally had no idea what they were in for. They didn't realize that they, I mean, Sidious and Dooku were just here,
I mean, what would you reckon? It must have been days, like max, because Dooku's flown all the way back, hasn't he? Or out, at least in their minds.
But I mean, from the Jedi perspective, we're looking for just like the loosest bit of evidence. Like, like in the last few years they were here. Like, they were just, you know what I mean?
It's
like
crazy.
they still use this place. Yeah.
Because even days to them is an insane level of closeness for what they were beyond even what they could dream of.
I can only imagine how, as they're following the tunnel and getting closer and closer to Palpatine, how the Jedi are starting to experience that same sensation I had playing Republic Commando, going through the Geonosian catacombs, expecting a boss fight with Grievous out of nowhere. I can just imagine them starting to get that feeling as they're going further down the tunnel, getting closer to the Senate district, like starting to worry, Wait, are we going to actually run into this guy?
There's a scene in the chapter that's coming up, we'll talk about in a minute, where you get that exact impression, which I'm looking forward to because it was a really funny set of like 2 pages, given the tension of the moment. But yeah, while this is happening, we get to chapter 31 with Yoda meeting with Palpatine again, and this is where he brings up the whole, this war strategy, if we can call it that, is terrible. Can we maybe change it? And Palpatine's like, well, my naval commanders will have to do what we're doing if you Jedi are spread too thin. It's more of the same. Palpatine trolling, Yoda giving intelligent arguments, Palpatine throwing semi-intelligent arguments warped back at him. And yeah, the same conclusion as ever. Nothing gets done outside of Yoda kind of suspicions growing.
Yep.
Still plays off well, though. I like that we can have so many scenes in that office and not be bored.
Well, yeah, it's nice that it comes from, like, the idea that Yoda actually, as patient, and sage like as he is, actually is frustrated at the very start of the chapter was a nice change of pace. It's like, why? I've sat in the offices of half 100, of these people. Why is this one? Why am I always on the edge of an argument with him? Which should probably be a bit of a red flag, but whatever. Like, in fairness to them, they think that Palpatine is like a pawn in the Sith Lord scheme, as opposed to the Sith Lord. So yeah.
Yeah. And it specifically makes note of the fact that he doesn't just put the Force last in his list of priorities. It's not on the list full stop. I like that that's kind of one of the methods Palpatine employed to throw them off the scent. It's very, very cool. But that leads us to chapter 32 with Dooku lamenting Grievous as he spars Magna Guards. Very interesting.
Yes, this one's fun. A lot to talk about.
Yeah.
Well,
I knew this one was going to come up.
Yeah.
Yeah, lots to talk about. Where do we start?
Because lightsabers.
This chapter is actually directly equivalent to one of the scenes from the Clone Wars micro series because, another scene in there where Dooku and Grievous are sparring. And then followed up by Sidious contacting them and letting them know, okay, so guys, attack Coruscant. Like, this is basically the same scene and an example of the continuity wrinkles between the two sources.
Yeah,
but
there's sort of alternate versions of the same approximate story. But I agree with that. When I was a kid and I first read this one, or like whatever, tween, I guess 12, 13, however old I was, this scene blew my mind. I didn't know what the hell he was talking about. Ataru answered by loose maw. I didn't know these terms. I know, but I mean, it's just like what, to this day, I don't know what the fuck loose maw means. I'm gonna say that, like as much of a
they
nerd
never
as I am.
really explored it.
I think he just made that one up, but who can blame him at the time though? But anyway, I don't know how deep we want to go in this.
There's
I expected
so
it
much.
to be mentioned.
Dooku makes a lot of what?
It's based on a lot of it is based around Dooku's own personal commentary on lightsaber combat, like his hatred for dual saber combat, which it's kind of ironic that Dooku himself hates dual saber combat, yet almost all of his apprentices use dual saber combat.
And look how he was defeated.
Yeah. Right? He kind of muses on that irony a little bit in the very chapter. You know,
Yeah.
It's almost like he's shaking his hand.
Dual saber combat in episode 2.
Yeah, which if he had done that, I imagine this segment wouldn't have been written because that would have invalidated him completely. But yeah, I mean, it's sort of like the idea is just him sort of looking around, and go, "Oh, you stupid fools! What are you doing? That's not how you do it. You know, I didn't teach you that way. Like, why do you insist on doing it wrong?" That's sort of the attitude he has about it.
And I like how that plays over to his actual interactions with Grievous here, because he almost does stand up and say that, like, "Dude, can you please just? I insist you do it properly." It's like, could you at least grant me some elegance? It's even sitting down in the huff afterwards. You know, I enjoyed the fact, because, you know, for a supremely masterful swordsman, that's going to bug you. The inefficiency and the inelegance of two blades. There are very limited situations when that can be actually practical. And in one-on-one dueling, it pretty much never is.
You're telling me you don't do that when you practice, Callan?
Not against one person, no. It's just almost inherently worse. But yeah, that's why I understand Dooku, because if you've got two blades, you can never have them in play at the same time. It just doesn't work, so it's irrelevant. You're just always just trading sides of your body. So I get Dooku here. But with Grievous, it's an exception because he's not standard humanoid. He can make it work, even with 3 and 4, as he says.
Yeah, and the other thing about Grievous is the fact that kind of frustrates Dooku is that Grievous and his Magna Guards, their fighting styles are based around making maximum use of their physical attributes. The fact that they're freaking metal robots with superhuman speed and strength. So they're all about maximizing those attributes, whereas Dooku's whole approach has always been path of least resistance, pure dexterity. So seeing these and having to deal with the fact that he trained these things, these brutish killing machines that just walk up and batter their opponents into submission and have no real skill. But at the same time, he kind of understands the necessity of it, and he knows that they can't really be any other way, which the funny thing is that this almost kind of makes Dooku into an inverse of Darth Bane. Bane viewed the only lightsaber form really worth studying as being Gemso, strong style. Leverage your strength, overpower the opponent. Whereas Dooku is like, no, Makashi, dexterous subversion, path of least resistance, take them out with no effort whatsoever. Which, it's an interesting little reversal and commonality.
And the kind of lens of perspective we get for how he trained all of his apprentices, he's training Grievous, the general musings on lightsaber combat as a whole in the galaxy, because he specifically says, but what about elegance? Where did elegance and gallantry go anyway? He just shrugged his shoulders at the whole situation in the end.
But that's what I like about it, and to this day, and that's what I liked about it in the past when I first read it, because I didn't understand lightsaber forms or any of that kind of stuff yet. I didn't actually have a genuine interest in it at that time yet. The first time I had an interest in that was when I read the follow-up to this, because in the Revenge of the Sith novel, sort of the strengths of the forms sort of they interlink with the character's personalities a lot more strongly. It's like, and sometimes it's even to answer like a weakness, like when Mace explains why Yoda uses Ataru to compensate for like advanced age and shortness, and compromised reach, things like that. That goes, that like illuminated something in my brain. I go, oh, this could be interesting. But at the time, I just liked what it said about Dooku's psychology and his personality, the way he viewed himself as above everybody else. This scene.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, I get that.
He also kind of berates Grievous, and he kind of brings up individuals who he thinks Grievous wouldn't stand any chance again. He notes Sindralig, Obi-Wan Kenobi, Mace, and Yoda. And I think this is an instance where I think Dooku is underestimating Grievous just a tad. I'm not saying he could definitively defeat all those people. Well, some of them I think he could, but
Well, he's overestimating Sindralig, I think, is what you're getting at. Yeah.
Yeah. The other thing
everything else he said was more or less on point, right?
Yeah.
I think the other thing is that Dooku himself never quite stops and thinks about how it is that he defeats Grievous. He always just assumes it's certain tricks that he keeps up his own sleeve to blindside Grievous without noticing that, oh no, there is a tactical approach you can use to bring him down. Just keep him at arm's length, be defensive, and slip in counters where you can. Whereas what Grievous is best suited for is going head-to-head and slugging it out.
Well, even in this very book, a few chapters prior, he notes that he himself, was having difficulty out-dueling Grievous during their training. So I think that says a lot.
It's specifically out-dueling, though, rather than actually beating him in combat outright. The Force is always going to be that trump card for any combatant against him.
And the other thing is I think anytime Dooku starts having any difficulties in a fight, it's purely just down to physical performance because he's an 83-year-old man. It's like skill-wise, it's like Grievous is good, but he's not even close to being Dooku's equal. It's...
I would be 100% on board with that. Not even close. He's not even close to Dooku in terms of overall power.
But what he is just good enough that he can contend with Dooku, and he has a major physical advantage, with Dooku's only saving grace being the Force. Sweep you into those cargo containers.
I mean, it's an interesting little sort of pocket in time when Grievous was like a completely different iteration from what he became, and when somebody like Syndralic at the time would have been featured in material like the video game, which really upped his his performance level. Like, and you get it. Like in the ramp up to Revenge of the Sith, I would understand why somebody played by Nick Gillard would be expected to be the ultimate badass when he isn't. But I mean, like you don't know that until retrospect. Hindsight's 2020.
Yeah.
And also at the time, I think also I don't know if this is a part of like Grievous in canon or not, because I don't care about canon so much. So I don't research this. But at the time, my understanding is like Grievous would get better and better the more experience he had, because like his computer like sort of in its brain memorizing and adapting to what you're bringing to the table better and better each time. So it gets harder and harder for Dooku to subvert him because he's seeing more and more of what Dooku can do, So he has other things going for him as well. He doesn't just rely on experience. Like he has a number of advantages. Working to compensate for that differential in their true skill set, and the fact that he doesn't use the Force.
He doesn't have the Force, but he does have a targeting computer hooked up to his brain.
Right.
Yeah. Joys of being a cyborg, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah,
Joys of being a cyborg.
And to be clear, I'm not saying that I think he's close to Dooku at the end of the day. That's my rationale for why he contends with him.
Yeah.
At least that iteration of the character.
Yeah, precisely. Specifically at this point in the EU's kind of progression, definitely.
Mm-hmm.
It's also one of the sad things about Grievous himself is that these sparring sessions with Dooku, as well as actual combat with the Jedi, are probably the only times he ever feels truly alive. He's got no ability to partake in all of the regular indulgences that a normal person does. He can't eat, he can't drink. I suppose he could listen to music, but what would he get from it? Whereas fighting,
I just imagine Grievous like with an iPod, just chilling in his ship.
Oh God.
What do you think he'd listen to? People in the comments, tell us what kind of music do you think Grievous would listen to?
And don't say electronic.
Personally,
you really should think before you ask the people in the comments for information. I'm just saying,
techno.
I know what I've just done, and I don't care.
Oh, but I do.
Yeah, and
it's almost
so
midnight.
let's move on to the Battle of Coruscant being discussed, and how they're basically pulling the trigger on that. Sidious arrives via hologram, little scuttling robot envisioned as he comes on screen. And basically, I love the fact that this triggering is happening because he's shitting the bed about the Jedi catching up, and he's kind of playing it off as, it's fine, and he's like lip twitching, and Count Dooku's like, are you worried? And he's like, I'm not worried, I'm not fine.
I'm a little surprised by, he's a little bit more honest about it though than what you're portraying. Like he does break a bit, which is for him, like, which he never does. Like, that's shocking. The slightest bit, the slightest admission of it.
Besides, Dooku specifically acknowledges that, is this actually admitting worry about what's going on right now? He's confused. He gets worried about it himself, and it shows how close the Jedi are, which I like. Again, kind of amps up the tension of that.
Again, my favorite thing. Them proactive.
Yeah, my favorite thing about this book is that the Jedi were doing their job, and at this point, where this is like right before the movie. We're in a situation where Palpatine has to engineer a situation where he can get himself off planet. How's he gonna do that? By invading fucking Coruscant. That's how the whole thing was, a desperate con. That's what the entire thing was. Like, you go in there and you're like your casual fan. Oh, we need a space battle in the Star Wars movie. Like, no, that was Palpatine. Like, that was his desperate maneuver. I need to get off planet because they're about to find my ass out. Like, that's what the whole thing was. I love that.
Bring in all the droids and capture me.
Yeah. And the idea as well that they then immediately just have him being brought back by Anakin and Obi-Wan like a day later maybe. it's funny
hours
to see how
later.
hours, yeah, his mind.
Yeah, but crisis averted. He bought himself enough time. Yeah. I mean, crisis was averted. So
it made sure that the Jedi never directly encountered him in their hunt, so they still got no idea who, because it's like, okay, the tunnel leads to the basement of 500 Republica, and this elevator leads to every single fucking apartment in the building.
And it's almost like the portrayal of the conversation where they discuss the strategy. Like Dooku's like, could you leave the planet? He's like, that's fucking ridiculous. Yeah, I could. How could I do it though? Like, you have to attack Coruscant. Like that's the only way it's going to fly. You have to abduct me. Yeah, you have to abduct me.
Mm-hmm. I love that. That's the portrayal. The fact that he goes, but just as you're saying this to me, my plan is forming in my head, and it basically amounts to what you just said there. It's like, oh shit,
that's what happened. Yeah.
It's brilliant. This book is like where you kind of, and I know there's others as well, but this book in particular is one of those instances where you can see why the Robot Chicken skit works in our heads as like very real off-screen Palpatine in his casual mode, because it's just the stuff that he pulls off is so off the cuff sometimes. Enjoyably and believably so.
I mean, it is sort of genius, but it's desperate too. You know, it's like, and that's what's entertaining about it. Like it worked. It wasn't a dumb plan, but he didn't do it because he was in his comfort zone. He did it because the Jedi were doing their job and almost found him out. You know, and it's I like that.
Yeah, and it's such a sledgehammer compared to the rest of the machinations of the grand plan. It's just like, invade Coruscant, hammer down. It's just to get.
And it kind of tells you what Palpatine's own big weakness is. He's great when he's several steps ahead, has all his plans laid out, and is leading you around by the nose. But the second you're able to do something that he's not expecting, well, his knee-jerk response is, "Oh shit, Force lightning."
Well, it's the fact that, you know, he has the advantage of being completely unknown to the Jedi. The moment that is threatened is when he goes on to the sledgehammer tactics, which is why I believe it and why I buy it and why it's so satisfying, because this is where the plan begins to slowly unravel. All because Gunray forgot his chair.
Don't forget your Mechno chairs, kids.
I think Palpatine is probably so incredibly grateful to Anakin for killing Newt Gunray last. Because fucking Gunray.
But moving on to chapter 33, with the conclusion of that, we get Obi-Wan and Anakin on the Belderone Med Star getting Fael treated, and Anakin wanting to go back to Coruscant. That's the kind of setup of this scene, effectively. There are a few moments that I enjoyed, and there was one in particular that was really weird for this in the last page. I enjoyed the moment when they're talking about fate and how Obi-Wan.
I think I know what you're talking about.
Yeah,
the infinite sadness thing.
Precisely.
Yeah.
It's like, what do you see your what do you think?
I had the same thought
for, and it's like infinite sadness.
I had the same thought. Like,
weird.
wait, what? That's not Obi-Wan's character. That's not Obi-Wan. No. That's not Obi-Wan's character, nor his circumstance. It's like, okay, we think we're wrapping up the war. Even his demeanor in Revenge of the Sith. They like, you just think about how the situation is when they get back on world. He's like, Anakin, you killed Count Dooku. Let's have a party. The whole thing. He's not a care in the world. It's like, I'm supposed to buy that his thought every day persistently, like, my fate is infinite sadness, and I'm resigned to it. It just doesn't seem true at all.
With the exception of the whole situation with Siri, there is really no sadness to Obi-Wan. I mean, he's the transcendent quintessential Jedi. So I just don't buy.
And Qui-Gon.
And Qui-Gon. I just don't buy.
I mean, there's a sadness like during his years as Ben Kenobi and all that, but it's not like his defining fucking trait. Yeah. He like you said, he transcends it. He works through that pain. That's Obi-Wan. Like, I don't know what this page was.
It specifically makes reference in this section of chapters that he is living proof that do or do not, there is no try is bullshit. It's like, you are living proof that trying exists, and I like that kind of frames this entire the issue we have with this line.
Right.
But on top of this, the chapter ends with the weirdest thing in my head. Obi-Wan specifically says, why don't you go and speak to Palpatine? Ask Palpatine about it. I'm like, what the hell? It's like, what? I don't have the answers to this cosmic question. Go ask Palpatine.
That's a little...
I think a lot of it is also Obi-Wan kind of covertly throwing his arms up in defeat and not realizing what Palpatine is, only going on what he thinks Palpatine and Anakin's relationship is. He's thinking, okay, I can't really give Anakin the answers to these questions because all I have are Jedi platitudes. go ask Palpatine. He's got his feet on the ground. He'll be able to at least tell you something you want to hear.
Yeah, and that's one of the only reasons I buy it to an extent, is that he's effectively just doing it as a way to placate Anakin. But even with that in mind, specifically earlier on in this book, he states out, "Oh, wait, no, reel it back in. You're giving him just Jedi platitudes. You need to be more Qui-Gon in this moment, more personal." He acknowledges that. If he wasn't interrupted by Yoda, he would have done that already. So in this moment, this is the moment where he should have had that, rather than just, go speak to your pal Palpatine. He'll get you back on track or not. It's just, I didn't buy it. To me, it's like, this is not an Obi-Wan moment.
A better way to handle it would be Obi-Wan just say something that Anakin doesn't quite buy, and in Anakin's head he's going, well, I'll go see what Palpatine has to say. Like, that might make me feel better. Mm-hmm. Like, it should have just been like an internal thought. Like, this is what I'll do. Maybe this will help, because that's in Anakin's character.
Yeah.
Like, when he doesn't get the answer he really wants, to go trying desperately to find it somewhere else.
Yeah, and usually go to the source of the person who just gives it all the time to Anakin. Just, here, you want this? Here, have it. I can engineer a reason for you to come back. That's fine. I can do that. And it's just knowing that it'll be what drives Anakin back off again. But yeah, effectively, the next chapter is him speaking with. No. Yeah.
Now the next chapter is chapter 34. Mason T.
Yeah, Mason T back in the tunnels.
Mm-hmm.
This is where they enter the tunnels and they're trekking through. We get a random passage about Dooku in the Golden Cuff drinking with footage, and I'm like, what? Why is this being mentioned? Did anyone get that? There's an entire paragraph.
Hey man, even Sith Lords got a bar hop sometimes too.
No, I get the idea. It's an interesting notion, but an interesting avenue of investigation. But Mace mentions it as like, oh, and another thing, we have this, and it's like, what has that got to do with anything? Why is this a part of this mental thought process right now? It really stood out to me.
Doesn't really progress the narrative.
It is the idea that this is footage that they all found there, right? So like, maybe it's more proof that Dooku's the subservient one in the relationship, that the Master is keeping tabs on him.
Did they specifically find it?
I don't know.
Because the impression I got
was no images of Dooku had surfaced in the recordings that had survived. Even if images of Dooku's tavern mates did surface, the Jedi had no means of identifying any of them as Darth Sidious. But the images could provide an additional starting point for further investigation.
Precisely.
But so far,
he's thinking that back in his head, oh, this is one of the lines of investigation we've been following for years. We never found anything. So unless he's specifically thinking maybe we'll find the missing piece here, which it doesn't specifically state, I don't understand why it is coming up. It seems like a really weird tangent he's just going on in his head.
So what do you think? I'm just saying, like, what is the context? Like, that's like a piece of footage they've had like on hand for years, like the Jedi have had, or like that's not something they found that day.
They've not found anything. The idea is that he's talking about, we were looking back on footage of him talking in this place to the senators, and there was never anything, any proof. There was missing parts, and the idea, I think, is that he was expecting to hopefully find them here, but they don't, and it doesn't say that they have. So I'm like, why? It doesn't specify that's even what they're looking for or what they're hoping for. So it's like, why is this coming up? It seems like a really weirdly, there's a paragraph missing here somewhere.
I don't remember reading it, and right now I'm as lost as you are, so I cannot help you.
Yeah, so
I'll say that.
Answer in the comments if you have a solution to that, guys. That it's actually.
Oh, wait, guys! I'm just rereading the bit in here, and it's kind of mentioned that he had been known to frequent the tavern, so it was something that was kind of the Jedi knew about as something that was floating around as a bit of gossip from back then that they're just now remembering and investigating seriously because they're like, it's a tavern frequented by politicians.
That's what I mean. It was one of their only leads back in the day, and they've been researching it since, trying to find any evidence or something. That's what it's presented as, something that he just muses that they've been doing. And I was like, why is that relevant? You must have been doing loads of stuff like that. Why are you bringing that up right now?
I think the thing is that they're only just starting to go through those images now. They hadn't bothered doing it way back when, because it was just like, okay, Dooku's going to the Golden Cuff. Who cares? Now it's like, oh, Dooku might have been meeting with Sidious at the Golden Cuff.
I don't buy that. They would have had to have been looking at it all the time. But anyway, it's a nitpick in the writing. I just stood out.
Yeah.
Moving on, we get them going through the tunnel system and finding the speeder that was obscured by the perception filter, or rather the Jedi. Shakti and Mace just walk straight past it, and we get the troops finding it. Again, that's the specific point I mentioned earlier, where they highlight that's how invasive and complete the shroud is. I like that if they have to have a shroud, which I hate, I like that they're actually putting emphasis on its significance here. Amps up the tension. T herself, says, "How did we miss that?" And then Mace is like, "The clue is in the question." Or the answer.
It's how did we miss that, because we're the Jedi that all of these Dark Force powers are intended to directly influence, subvert, and deflect, whereas they are not and can see right through it because they don't see the Force at all. And it's kind of an interesting examination of how the Force is both. It goes back to a lot of the stuff that Treya was saying in Knights of the Old Republic 2, how the Force is simultaneously an unbeatable advantage and an absolutely crippling weakness, because you start leaning on your Force abilities so much and neglecting your mundane skills, but then you come up against an opponent that you can't beat with your Force abilities, or something you can't understand through the Force, and you're completely defeated. Whereas the normal mundane person who's not relying on the Force can deal with it perfectly because he just brings on a mundane solution.
Yeah, I like that the way around that was the fact that they brought the
clones.
Yeah, the clones. The idea of bringing all of these methods to bear. They're throwing all of their resources at this. It makes you buy the success they're getting as a result. But anything else to discuss in that chapter, or are we going to move on?
Move on.
All right. So chapter 35, we get Anakin speaking to Palpatine about whether or not he should stay with Obi-Wan and go to Tyth, or whether or not he should return to Coruscant. And there's really no reason for him to return to Coruscant. So this is an easy resolution from our perspective. But Anakin is struggling through it on an emotional level because he really wants to go home, and he wants to be part of the hunt for Sidious, and he wants to see Palpatine. All of these things come together.
Yep.
Yeah.
And it kind of turns into a funny little be careful what you wish for sort of thing when we skip ahead a few days to Revenge of the Sith, and Anakin is on Coruscant, and he is seeing Padme, and he is part of the hunt for Sidious.
And maybe he shouldn't be.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's a little bit of foreshadowing for that, I think, which is quite nice. And I like that you tie it into his personality and his personal emotions and investment in the situation as well. It's not just a case of, let's throw a bit of tension in by having him almost have gone back early, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, you had something you wanted to say, Matt?
Not really. It doesn't need to be said.
Okay, no worries.
I'm fading. I'm getting tired.
Sorry,
we're almost there. We're almost there.
Yeah. So moving on to chapter 36. Sorry. Surprise! Another corridor. Another corridor closer. I love that dialogue. That little back and forth between T and Windu as they're getting this close to the underside of 500 Republica.
Yeah, it's like it's a little. I don't want to say it's out of character for Mace. It's been that Mace has had such precious little to celebrate over the course of this war that you're starting to see. It's rare to see him positive about something, or that overtly positive at any rate. It's like he really believes, we're about to end it. Let's go. Let's keep going. It's like reaching that last leg of the marathon, which is it's nice, especially coming from his mouth,
Yeah, you see some of the cracks in the tension, how he's like, come on, we have to do this. Come on, this cannot be another loose dead end. He's like, he's fully he's wanting this. And as you said before, Matt, Connor, you were talking about how they're expecting that boss fight. This is that scene where it kind of establishes that, because they break in the door, they form into formation, they lightsabers blazing, and that's when we get surprise, another corridor from T. So they are very much on edge, and that kind of builds up the tension of are they going to get there? Are they going to get there? Will it end with them achieving their goals? And obviously we know it won't, but it's effective nonetheless. I enjoy it for that.
Yeah. There's another little detail in here that I like, that the probe droids confirm that their query is in fact human. And again, that's one of those little details you really don't think about until you hear it. It's like, yeah, from their perspective, how would they have known that the Sith Lord was human? He might not have been.
Yeah, it's another little tick in the box.
Like how we know from Darth Plagueis that quite a few of the Rule of Two Sith Lords were not human. It's specified that we got Gravid's apprentice, who was a Twi'lek. We got Tenebriss's master, who was also a Twi'lek. Tenebriss himself, who's Bith. Plagueis, who's a Mun. If you want to count Maul, he's Zabrak. And we also got that picture in the Book of Sith that shows a Deveronian Sith Lord. Well, granted, that was probably just an illustration by Bane, but hey, we'll take what we can get.
And one can hardly call Palpatine human at the end of the day. So,
Actually, I disagree with that. I believe that Palpatine is actually a very, very human individual. The problem is that he just represents the worst aspects of humanity.
To the extreme, yeah.
I was gonna say,
it's pretty out there.
Yeah, I was gonna say I strongly suspect that Callan was joking.
Yeah,
yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, that scene wraps up, and we get the we get the transition onto chapter 37 with the fighter descent over Tythe with Obi-Wan and Anakin and poor Red Squadron. You've got to pity any wingmates that get attached to, or any squadron that gets attached to Anakin's antics, because he does tend to get his soldiers killed a lot. I mean, his heart's in the right place and he's doing his job, and they're doing theirs, but they all die. And I imagine
the problem
quite a lot.
is that Anakin needs to stop telling his troops, "Follow me."
Yeah,
because they can't.
It specifically
can't follow him.
Yeah, it specifically said to Obi-Wan at the start, a fellow Jedi. He said, "Don't you trust me?" Yes, I trust you. I just can't keep up with you. It's like trying to bank and roll. If a Jedi is struggling, particularly a Master, the clones have no hope. You got to imagine how many got killed trying to hold up to his expectations.
It's funny, like the picture I have in my head now is just him, because he doesn't really need the help anyway. He goes, "Follow me," and they're like, "Right on," and then they stay where they are, and he does his thing anyway, and then they join at the last minute, like, "Good job." He's like, "We did it. It's like, didn't we?" How would he know? How would he know the difference?
I can imagine the visual shot of them falling back into formation at the end, and he's like, guys, he's looking back finally, like, we were with you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I could buy that instant. That's brilliant. I want to see that. But yeah, we get that ascent, and they manage to make their approach to the base that they suspect Dooku is in, and they begin their assault. That's basically that chapter ending. Moving on to chapter 38, the final chapter we'll be discussing today. Palpatine being tracked right under 500 Republica. They're right under the building he's in. They're this close to finding out and tracking.
They're literally in Darth Sidious's basement.
Yeah, literally.
Yeah.
And they're that close, and then the Battle of Coruscant begins. They hear the explosions of the turbo lasers hitting the shielding and buildings and people cowering, and they run up to the streets, and they do what Jedi do. They immediately jump into action and try and save as many as they can. T herself being assigned to Palpatine's defense, and this is where the most of the divergence from the Clone Wars micro-series happen, but in the same way you can kind of blend them together in your head reasonably well, with a few exceptions. This is the kickoff for the battle. I love the setup for the battle itself. I'm looking forward to talking about the actual execution in the next part.
I think one of the little aspects of this chapter that I rather liked was just the possibility that with the Battle of Coruscant starting with Mace Windu and Shaak Ti in the sub-basement of 500 Republica, what if the building got destroyed while they were down there?
Oh dear.
What if?
It could have been another one of those little moments where Charlie went to work early that day and saw such and such at Watergate that we were mentioning earlier with Newt Gunray. Just one of those bits where just one little thing going wrong and the whole story goes in a totally different direction.
It would have been one of those Game of Thrones tragic moments, like the Citadel kind of just blowing up kind of situation. That would have been horrible. But yeah, it's an interesting what if.
Droids reporting back to Dooku, "Master, we have just destroyed 500 Republica." Dooku's just like,
apart from that, Palpatine is like, "You destroyed my fucking house." But any closing thoughts on this part, guys? On these chapters that we've just been through and covered before we wrap up?
I think we covered everything.
It's basically just the villains and the heroes playing chess with each other, and for the first time in years, the Jedi are actually contending, even if they are at a disadvantage, even if they inadvertently explain their game plan to the man himself. At this point, they actually are contending. They're no longer just being led around by the nose. In a lot of ways, this is kind of what the prequel trilogy should have been. It should have been the Jedi legitimately contending, but instead we got the Jedi sitting with their thumbs up their asses.
Yeah, it's one of the things I love most about this book. It's the fact that we get the Jedi doing what they should be doing, in a believable and entertaining way. There's a lot going on here that's just fun to watch as well as satisfying to see executed.
Most definitely.
I agree with that.
Yeah, so with that wrapped up then, those are our thoughts on part 2 of Labyrinth of Evil, chapters 19 to 38. Yes, I remembered and got it right. Let us know what you think in the comments below, guys. Anything we've missed or anything you want to cover in greater detail. Looking forward to talking to you about that. I am Retty4, and I still don't have an outro.
Jenserai1, good night, YouTube. We love you.
Evernova95. We hope you guys enjoyed. We'll see you guys later.
Great Jedi 91. Take care, guys. Thanks for watching.
Goodbye.